All right, welcome back or welcome to another episode. Today, we have a topic which I'm intentionally playing out right now. I'm slowing it down, making you wonder what's going to happen because that topic is overthinking. I want you to go through all of this potential emotions, sensations, whatever it is today. We're going to talk about what it looks like to spend too much time thinking and potentially not taking action, or what it looks like to think with discernment. Last week, our discussion was awareness and mindfulness and using meditation to get to our next steps. So this flows right into, all right, how are we taking action? Are we overthinking things? How do we use our discernment, our awareness, and our mindfulness to get there? So, as always, I'm Gunnar. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew here. Andrew, how do you catch yourself overthinking recently? And we'll start recently.
Well, overthinking, I catch myself when I start to get a headache. I'm like, what is going on here? No, not always does it get to the point where I get a headache if I'm overthinking. But when I catch myself overthinking, I notice rumination on thoughts that come up again and again and again, and they tend to send me in circles, kind of like a negative feedback loop. So that's what I notice when I'm overthinking. I notice frustration sometimes as well. There's not a lot of progression in overthinking. And as I break down the notion of overthinking, as I'm in a state where I'm not currently overthinking anything, I notice that overthinking occurs when there's an assumptive thought around something, meaning I'm assuming that something should happen, or there's an assumption that someone should do something. I noticed that overthinking also occurs when the thought process has not gone through the proper filtration system, is how I describe it. That filtration system being my values, my beliefs, and any specific goals that I'm working towards. So when I'm overthinking, or when I catch myself in that state, usually those are the things that come to mind. I'm curious, Gunnar, I'll send that question back over your way. What happens when you're in the process of overthinking? What do you notice?
Okay, so overthinking for me is a constant battle, as my nature is to be analytical at first, which is a good thing and a hindrance in the sense I begin to overthink the smallest details that are really diverging me from the path. So I like this idea. You were talking about your circle, or your thoughts going in a circle and having that negative feedback loop. You just re-hit, and you keep coming back to it. For me, the path is very similar until I have those opportunities to say, okay, did I make progress? What's the next step in that path? And can I straighten that path out towards the goal, towards the outcome? And for me, like even the process of trying to put together this conversation, overthinking can come up really quickly because expectations start to creep in, whether I am explicitly putting those expectations on myself or if I am inheriting them. Specifically, like I listen to a lot of podcasts and I know what podcasts I like sound like. Therefore, that becomes the expectation in my mind towards what they're going to be. So when we go into this process, all right, I know that I'm making the steps. We did the intro, we did the first question. We talked about where we came from in our previous pieces. And as soon as I get those spots put in line, the path really starts to clear up and I can go forward. And it's also important to understand what is the outcome, right? You were touching on goals, values. I think beliefs fit in there really well. Is all right, the outcome is important, and it's important to me because I get to see who I'm going to become when I get to that outcome. And therefore, the process can be cleared up, going away from the overthinking or the fear of deliberation, just sitting there over and over and over again, where it's like, all right, I'm really excited for what can happen when I put these things into play and make that first step. So, what that looks like. I'm curious now that we're talking about, all right, what does the process of overthinking look like? Is there a specific example of an action that you hold yourself back on because of overthinking?
Well, there's a lot of moments in life where there's opportunity for overthinking. And with our specific backgrounds as business owners, coaches, and it's especially business owners and coaches who work by themselves, for themselves, there's a lot of times where we both notice ourselves like overthinking. And that would be, for me, the most obvious apparent situation in my life experience where I noticed a lot of overthinking. That would be like the simplest answer, like business for sure. Although I notice it sometimes in other areas of my life as well, in different circumstances and situations. If you didn't know, or if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I like to surf. And a couple of weeks ago, I was down in Mexico, and I knew there was a big swell coming in, a swell that would push my capabilities as a surfer. And I was excited because I felt like the swell was just at my just above my threshold. So it was like the perfect amount to push myself. By the time I got to the area that I wanted to surf, it's like a world-class surf spot. I get there, and to put it in perspective, the first guy I see catch a wave there dropped in on this 15-foot wave and just shot right through. And I was like, oh, the second I saw that, it's like, that was way outside of my framework for capabilities of surfing. The first thing I thought to myself, like, oh shit, I'm gonna get my ass kicked out there today. Like, should I do this? Like, is this something I want to move forward with? I might hurt myself. Maybe there's a reef. If I go into a wave like that, it might slam me into it, break my arm or my shoulder, my ribs, or whatever might happen. And especially in physical scenarios or in these physical situations where there is legitimate risk and there is legitimate danger. There is, like, you could argue there is just cause for a little bit of overthinking in that situation. You're getting out there and you're putting yourself into a situation that's going to push you and challenge you. And for me, I noticed a lot of thoughts in that specific situation there that came up. Oh, it's getting really windy right now. The waves are getting blown out. Like, this isn't even worth it. I'm not even gonna be able to catch a wave. The swell's too big. I might hit a reef. I might hurt myself. All these thoughts came up. And what happened was I came back to, I was like, okay, of course, this is like fear speaking to me right now. It's telling me, Andrew, you should think twice about going out there into the water. Then I recognized this, and I told myself, I was like, this is my opportunity right here. This is my chance to go out here and push and challenge myself a little bit more so than I had. I'm going to start by putting on my wetsuit, putting some sunscreen on, waxing up my board, going through my normal process prior to getting out there in the water. And just do that. That's what I need to do first before I go out into the water. Get myself suited up, sunscreen, board is set. Like, all right, so walk out to the water and scope things out. Let's see, like, where the best point of entry is going to be into this break. Get out there, see it. I'm with my buddy. I'm like, all right, just go for it. Just do this. I'm like, there's nothing left to think about besides just get out there and surf and go for it. And I went out there and surfed, paddled out for an hour. I got my ass kicked, but it's okay. I didn't catch a single wave. I went out there though. I tried, and I came out of the water, and the fact that sometimes in surfing, the fact that you just survive and you don't die out there is a win in of itself. And in that specific experience, I could have let overthinking drive me to staying on the beach. Let's just go get a beer and some tacos, take it easy, and just drive back to San Diego. Instead, I chose to take that action, get out there, do the best I could in that scenario, knowing that the next time I come back out here, I'm going to be more prepared. Mentally, I'm going to be in a better place. I've physically experienced this break right here. I paddle out into it. So I know the next time I come, when the waves are a little bit smaller and there's a better form to them, I'm going to crush it out there. I'm going to do my best. And in that scenario, it would have been extremely easy just to say no and just let the overthinking stop me in my tracks from getting out there and doing what was basically the whole trip down to Mexico was focused around, was going out there and surfing. And I chose to not necessarily ignore that fear. I definitely took all the environment into consideration, and there was a lot of assessment in the process, and I chose to make a decision based off of all of that. But once I got to that point, I was like, I'm at the shoreline. All I got to do is just get in the water and paddle out. I just did it. And I mean, it was tough, but that's part of what, you build resilience around these kind of things. Like the fact that I was able to paddle out there and just paddle out and then come back in, even though I didn't catch a wave, that gives me the confidence to go back out there again and be able to handle something, if not the same, potentially bigger next time. So that's just like a separate experience that I had around recently in the past few weeks around overthinking and just taking action. Although, for some people, like they might say, oh, that's just in the context of surfing, like whatever, like that's not a big deal. I mean, for me in my life, that was an important experience. Like that was something that I really wanted to push myself and challenge myself on, just like any other competitor in any other sport will push and challenge themselves in that situation. And so I'm curious, Gunnar. I know, obviously we talked about there being a lot of experiences as a business owner, as a coach, where we could easily come up with situations where we're overthinking and not taking action. Are there any life experiences, whether it's in business or personal life, where you've had a similar experience and you've overcame the analysis paralysis and took action?
Far too many. That's the honest answer. Is every day of my life is shown something that I've overthought or I'm currently overthinking. What's really helped me, and I want to point them out from your story as well, because surfing is not your profession, right? Like it's something that you really enjoy doing. It's something you put time and thought into. Yet we can fall really quickly into overthinking and inaction, which is really a big piece of this. So, like as a competitive athlete, for me, my goals become very grand. Like I can see myself accomplishing really amazing things, really strong, powerful, whatever superfluous adverb you want there, for my goals. And that can be paralyzing in the sense that I can overthink what I need to do every day, because it's a lot. Like I put hours and hours every day into my training, and the hardest thing for me to do is start. So going back to you, like you went through the process, right? Like getting your wetsuit and getting all these things put together, and then that like puts you into the water. And as soon as you're there, you go to the next step and you go to the next step. For me, I intentionally come to the gym. I read mantras before I go in. I put my stuff typically in the same place. I make sure I put all my stuff right where I want it, like in my bag. And then I go through the same exact shoulder stretch routine, because I know as soon as I go through those steps, the next things are going to happen. And then when I get through those next steps, whether that's a specific warm up with the barbell or it's getting my heart rate up, the next thing happens and the next thing happens. So the steps that I set up every day that I don't have to think about keeps me away from overthinking. Because if I'm like, I'm going to go to the gym, I need to be the best in the world right now, I forget that if I'm going to be my best right now, I still have to do my shoulder stretches. I still have to do my routine that I don't even have to think about. It's a very sensational experience, right? I'm feeling my shoulders elongate, I'm feeling my lats, I get my heart rate up a little bit. All those things come into play. And how that transfers then into my business is I write programming, I do phone calls with individuals, both on training specifically and mindset training. And where I've gotten to now is I can way overthink every single part of my business. And how I get past that is I have a routine to keep me moving or get me moving, really, if it's a new day. So in terms of programming, we talked about this before we started recording, is I want my programs to be so helpful to an individual that they never have to ask me a question unless it's, something outside of my control. So when I write a program, I could sit and look at one single spot in a set, thinking about one exercise for a half hour, maybe longer, when that's not the process I want to follow. So now I can go, all right, what helps me? I write everything out in broad structure. And as soon as I have that, I can put it into my program software and just go boom, boom, boom. It's there. And then I can put the details in, because then I know where I've been. I know what the idea is, and I can be much more specific and help the individual that's going to get this program progress. So having that idea of like, all right, what is the structure that allows me to get past the over analysis and then do the action, right? Like taking action is sometimes such a grand idea. Like you and I both, like we've both experienced, all right, we want to make this amount of money in a month, or we want to have these big pieces happening because we see ourselves as a really good coach and an important person to other clients. And where I want to take this next is, what does it look like for us to break down our day and clarify where we're going? Like what is your routine outside of actual work to get you going?
I like that you bring this up. My coach that I work with right now and I are in our previous session, we both hit on creating structure for accountability. And it's this past week when I have implemented that, my productivity and like ability to get things done increased significantly, without it being at the expense of my personal needs as well. Because you asked me about my routine. The first thing I prioritize in my routine is myself. We fill our cups up first and we give from the overflow. As coaches, that's the most sustainable coaching practice that you can do if you want to be a coach for life, right? And how I do that is through my morning routine. And that's part of how I create structure for my day. And that involves movement, like specific movement as far as loosening up my spine, my shoulders, and my hips for the day, sometimes my ankles as well. It involves going for a walk. I will go for like a 15 to 20 minute walk every morning. that's something I've actually implemented more recently, back in something I kind of ebb and flow with. In addition to that, I read. I make about 20 to 30 minutes available for me to read, whether it's a textbook or just a book that I enjoy reading. I like to place reading in my early morning routine because I'm usually too tired to keep my eyes open at night. In addition to that, I finish up my morning routine by making myself a breakfast and cleaning myself up and getting ready for the day and then heading out the door. And that structure is so important to me. When I'm out of alignment with that aspect of my life, it makes all other aspects of my life, work, relationships, that a little bit more challenging. So for me, when I create that structure in the morning, just like you do with your shoulder mobility routine, getting started with your workout, just like I did getting ready to surf with the wetsuit and the sunscreen on and all that kind of stuff. It's the routine that sets the tone for the rest of the day. And a routine slightly outside of that routine that I've recently implemented with my coach, which was what I was getting at, was creating structure for accountability. Myself as a coach, I have tons of appointments all week with clients, people who are not my clients, doing a variety of things. I live by my Google Calendar. My Google Calendar, it saves me a lot of brain space. Let's just say that. So what my coach and I have done is I've created a time every Sunday on my calendar where I sit down, maybe half an hour to an hour, and I go through and I fill out my schedule and I block off all the activities to fill my cup up first. Those morning routines, and workouts, and things like that I do to prioritize myself. Then from there, I put in my business activities, training clients, doing administrative work. Outside of that, there's another aspect to running a business. It's called working on your business, not working in your business. I prioritize time in my schedule to work on my business. That's creating marketing materials, creating resources for my clients, whether it's about nutrition or exercise, whatever it could be, that's going to add more value to my clients in their experience that they have with me. And then lastly, comes back to my me time. I don't make this last, but I talk to my girlfriend too, and I try and make sure we can allocate time together to spend time together throughout the week as well. Like maybe it's a couple of evenings where she's a nurse, so she works 12-hour shifts, so she'll be gone a lot of times. Sometimes she comes back, she needs her recovery time from her 12-hour shifts, and that's not always valuable time for us to spend together. So I figure out when she's available that week, and I ask her if we can spend time together. So all the things that are priorities to me, as far as myself, my relationships, my work, as far as working in the business, working on the business, making time to do programming, do administrative work, like these are all things I'm structuring out my schedule. So all I have to do, there's no overthinking in the process. All I have to do is just look at my calendar and say, oh, this is what I'm doing next. Oh, this is what I'm doing here. And because everything is prioritized and it's based off of things that are most important to me in my work week, there's a lot of flow to it. It takes a lot of the overthinking out of it. Within that structure that I've created for myself, I would say the area where I notice myself still tending to overthink sometimes is when I work on my business. And that's a creative process. And for me, overthinking and creative thinking, they run in opposites to each other. So that's where I noticed myself when I mentioned earlier in my business, the overthinking occurring was when I try and get into these creative processes. I have to remind myself and always notice, okay, I'm overthinking right now. Do I need to make space? Do I need to change up my environment? Do I need to take a few moments to breathe and get back into that creative space? Focus on the things that help me get back into that proper mindset where I can think with clarity. Run those filters through those thoughts that I have. Is this in line with my goals, values, and beliefs? If so, then continue to push forward and work on something. Sometimes, when it comes to overthinking too, I've heard quotes like, Albert Einstein, like some of his best ideas and thoughts came while he was taking bubble baths. You know, like so what I always screw this expression up, but you can't see the forest for the trees, right? I think that's what it is, right? When you're so caught up in the thick of it, you have to take yourself out of it and put yourself into a different scenario to help you break out of a thought pattern or thought process. So
yeah, detachment, right? Like what's our ability to detach from an idea or a thought and then go away from, all right, I'm overthinking one simple thing when there's more than one answer, right? This is something you and I have talked about, is if all of our energy is converging on one thing, we focus solely on one possibility, one answer for one problem, where most likely there are divergent paths that can also get us there. Like if we can see all of the opportunities, all of the possibilities, we can then pick what one makes sense instead of forcing one to happen. And that can be a really good opportunity for us to take action with just one step in mind. Like, what's the next step? Can I try this out? Will it work as well as I hope? Maybe, maybe not. I still have other options that I can try, right? There's more than one way to answer a certain equation, right? Like 2 + 2 is 4, but so is 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. It still gets us there, right? Like, 8 divided by 2, that's 4, right? Like there's multiple ways to get an answer. Maybe that's an oversimplification of something, but math is a universal language.
Yeah.
There's multiple ways to get to a certain end point, right?
Yeah, and in that same very conversation, what we were talking about earlier is, there are multiple paths to a singular solution, but sometimes to a singular problem, there's multiple solutions. And that was the idea that I brought up in our conversation before we started recording. It's something I was aware of before, although I recently read this concept in a book recently, and it has brought it to my mind in a completely different framework. And it's the languages you're using as well, convergent versus divergent, right? We, like you said, a lot of times we think that answers are binary. It's either yes or no, when really there's gradations between, right? There can be multiple variations of yes, multiple variations of no, right? And how do we select the right one? How do we exercise that discernment? And that's where, for me personally, discernment is where we use our judgment to filter our thoughts through our values, beliefs, and our goals, and use that as a way to refine that and come back to, okay, oh, this is out of alignment for me. This is not something that I would normally do. Easy decision to make, not going to do this, right? So yeah, I see what you're saying there as far as thinking, different ways to get to a solution. It's so, how do I say this? It's so multifaceted. You have to take the time to think through this process, have that awareness, and to meditate on these things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I would encourage everyone is, if you have an issue or a problem that you're trying to solve, one quick way to get going is to ask someone else what their opinion is, right? How do we take in other perspectives and help us move forward? Like I know, just right off of this conversation, I'm learning things that I was just on the edge of figuring out, but needed that push to get to that next step. Every time I talk to you, every time I talk to other coaches, even talking to my clients, like what am I missing to help you, and being open to new ideas, right? That, I think that's a form of detaching as well.
Yeah.
Is I'm so stuck on my thoughts and my beliefs, I'm not going to get anywhere. Like I have to have this humility in play to know that I can be wrong. And that for me is where creativity starts to open up. If someone can no longer do an exercise for a few weeks because of a little injury, hopefully it's something that happened outside of training. But if that shows up, I can go, oh, right. Like we can still train the stimulus, the goal in a different way, right? That action step, that process may change. The outcome can still be the same.
Yeah, for sure.
I find myself now reflecting on it is my overthinking often comes from my own expectations of what I've already done, not necessarily what potential can come from it. And, a good question to ask yourself if you're listening to this, but I'm going to ask it to you, Andrew, is how do you change your perspective if you've already solved a problem in the past and need to solve it again, but the parameters are different? What are you going to change to help you solve this same problem, but in a new context?
Wow. Is it really the same problem anymore, though, if the parameters are different?
You tell me. You do the math, man.
um, hmm. I have to chew that one up a little bit, digest it, because you can, I mean, what you're describing and the way I'm interpreting it right now is two different problems, right? Or maybe they're the same problems, like you say, but like with a different framework. Like how you go about solving that problem. I mean, there needs to be a lot of context to it, but yeah, you first off, like I would imagine you would like assess the situation, right? So you have X problem that you've solved before in the past. You've probably gone through a similar framework of how to solve that problem. You like gather information, you make assessments, you see what's going on, and let's say like in this context here, like if it's two different parameters, but you're both trying to get the same solution, maybe it's two different people who are both trying to achieve weight loss, right? Let's use that as a framework because that's the first thing that comes to mind as coaches. So as I say that, and now the answer becomes very apparent to me because of course you have two different people who are basically wanting to lose weight and achieve the same goal, although the path to getting there can be subtle differences between one or the other, right? So one person could lose weight by keeping the same amount of exercise or lack of exercise they're doing and completely dropping off their calories. The other person could maintain their calories and increase the exercise and be in a deficit that way and achieve the same outcome. Just purely based off the notion of being in a caloric deficit as being one of the most important things to losing weight, right? Not the only thing, but one of the most important things. So like that to me is like how I would like go through that thought process of same problem, different parameters, right? So maybe the reason why one person wants to, or one person decides to exercise more but eat the same is because they're a foodie and they like enjoying certain types of food, and they're like, I'm not willing to compromise the food that I eat on a regular basis. It's like, okay, that's fine, fair enough. Like, well, if you're eating this amount of food on a regular basis, you're going to need to burn this amount of calories through exercise and physical activity on your own to achieve that outcome, right? That's one possible way to do it. This other person is like, I don't want to exercise. I hate going to the gym. I don't like working out, but I still want to lose weight. I don't mind changing up my diet. That's easy. Like, I don't care about food anyways. And bam, you can make those adjustments to the diet and still help them achieve the same outcome. Of course, there's nuances to that, right? If you are not exercising but you eat less, yeah, you can lose weight, but is it the kind of weight we want to be losing? Could we be losing muscle mass rather than fat mass? Like, there's all those like nuances to that aspect. And same thing, vice versa. I would imagine, someone who doesn't really want to change their diet, but they still want to lose weight. But even though they're exercising more and they're losing weight because they're in a caloric deficit, they're still eating the foods that they want. Are they really healthy? Like, are they nourishing their body with whole foods and putting like micronutrients into their body that are going to nourish themselves and allow them to live a healthier lifestyle? Maybe. So like those are subtleties within that. But like in the bigger picture of things, like coming back to like different parameters, same outcome, like you have to assess, gather information. And in that context of that example right there, it's like you're learning more about the individual, like things that they will do, things that they won't do, right? And within those parameters, you're using the divergent thinking process to get someone to like a similar outcome. Like, how do they want to get here, and this is what they're willing to do. How do I get them to that end result? Okay, I get them to that end result by increasing the amount of calories they burn per day, more so than by the calories that they eat, and that's going to get them to the goal. And then the inverse is there as well. So I mean, when you're looking at any problem, there is a process of assessment, there's a process of implementation, and like taking action, right? So in the context of overthinking, like there's like multiple ways to skin a cat, right? That's the age-old expression right there. But once you like that this strategy is going to get you the result that you want, then the only thing stopping you from achieving it is then taking action, right? If that said client who doesn't want to change their diet but only wants to lose weight through exercise, if they miss a day, they're not going to be in that caloric deficit if they're keeping up with the same eating habits, right? Someone who is wanting to lose weight without exercising but eating less, if one day they decide to have a cheat meal or something like that and they eat more calories than they have burned for the day, they could be in a surplus or be calorically neutral for the day. So the taking action part is the hard part. And I noticed like a lot of people, that's where the overthinking occurs. And within that specific context of weight loss, I mean, that's why people come to people like you and I, because they hear all about these diets, like all these fad workout programs. We're like, no, like let's focus on the fundamentals. Let's cut out the overthinking, focus on these core actions that are going to get you the results that you want, right? And let's take action, let's implement, let's get going. So
Yeah, absolutely. And to highlight parts of what you were just talking about, like if the goal is to lose some weight, and personally, I don't work with clients specifically on losing weight. I want them to gain muscle, and that's a different way to get there, right? Like we can gain lean mass through certain steps. One thing that sticks out is like, how do we solve a problem that we've solved in the past, but has different parameters or different contexts now? One thing that really stands out to me for myself is changing my environment and creating the space that is going to allow me to get into that state of flow or creativity, whatever phrasing you want to put there. So when we change our environment, that could be as simple as, all right, I'm gonna go look at my pantry objectively and pull out things that I know are going to entice me to overeat or eat too much of a certain thing, and being okay with, hey, I understand this, I've learned this, let's take it out and see what happens. Right? That's exactly what you were getting after in the framework piece of, all right, let's view what's in front of us, let's gather that information, let's act on it, give it some time, we'll reassess, and then we can choose to act again, or we can start over. We can view it from where it is now, gather that information, choose to act. Whatever that is, we can make those steps to avoid the overthinking trap of, I don't know what to do, but I'm going to focus so hard on one detail when it may be as simple as taking yourself out of a room for a little bit.
Yeah.
For you, going for a walk in the morning, reading. That's setting the environment you want. And that allows you then to be intentional and put attention where you want it. I know for me, I have a difficult time just sitting down at home doing a bunch of work on my computer, because there are things that I've put in the room that distract me and are comforting. So for me, I can go to, a coffee shop or like a, general workplace. And as soon as I'm in that new environment, I know why I'm there.
Yeah.
I have my focus and my energy is on what I came to do. And that makes a difference. Like I remember, fortunate, unfortunate at the same time, my very last semester of college was when everything got shut down a year and a half ago. And it was so difficult for me to focus on finishing out, which unfortunately were gym classes. If we can maybe get into that on a future episode, just venting.
Future episode, Gunnar venting about
Gunnar venting about his college experience.
Finish your story. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had such a difficult time focusing on the work that was required of me because my environment was the same every single hour of the day. And as soon as it happened, it was like still snowy, it was in Minnesota. As soon as I was able to go outside and do some of my work, I improved my productivity. I improved my creativity. Same thing applied. I was just spinning my wheels, and then I was able to move to Florida. And as soon as I came down here, I set up the environment that I wanted. And that change allowed me to be more productive. And then when I'm going to work now, I know that if I go somewhere else, my time is going to be so much more valuable. And that's an important thing, is what are we doing all the time that we're maybe not thinking about that is keeping us from action as well towards what we want.
So like the activities that we're like unconscious of that are deviating from what we want.
Yeah, it could be an example of, I don't have the food I want in my refrigerator, so I'm just going to keep coming back to it and looking at it. It's the same environment. Nothing really has changed. When I can make a decision, all right, I'm going to go to the grocery store. And as I'm sitting in the parking lot before I go in, I want to be like, all right, these are things that are going to help me fuel for the week. All right, like instead of always being in the same place, I think we're getting close to a topic of like immediacy and how simple things have become through technology.
Is that immediacy?
Yeah, like how immediate things can happen that we miss some of the process, which is really the underlying thing here. Is if we're overthinking, we're thinking about the outcome, or we're unsure of what we can do right now, that next step to then take action and be in the process. So my example here, like if I keep going to the refrigerator, nothing sticks out for me to pick and eat. And I just keep doing that loop, but I don't change anything. I don't change the environment. The immediacy is like, we can go on our phone literally while we're looking in the fridge and order stuff and go get it. It might not be as intentional as we are if we're actually going there and having that discernment. Like, all right, I'm gonna look at this versus this. And, oh, I didn't think about that. I can get that and make a meal from it. all of these processes can come from that change of environment, or removing yourself, detaching from the problem that's just stuck to your face.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. How, yeah, just changing up your physical space, like where you occupy, what space you occupy, it can stimulate you to think differently and to break outside of the context of overthinking something, right? Yeah. I noticed that I'm very well aware of that myself. It I have, like, my home that I live in. I have like a little office space there. I have my studio. Yet sometimes like yourself, I find myself needing to break away from these immediate environments to get into a different space so I can be productive. Like, just like yourself, like I find myself most productive in coffee shops. So even though I have like my own studio and like my own office back at home where I can do all this work, I notice I'm most productive and focused when I get into those spaces. It cuts out distractions. I imagine being in those kind of places too, where you might be with other people who are doing the same thing. You end up inevitably like taking on the energy and like of those people in that environment. Everyone's focused, and maybe not everyone in a coffee shop, but if you sit in a cluster of people where everyone's got their headphones in, their laptops out, they're typing or doing whatever, you're like, okay, everybody's here is working. It kind of creates that almost like, it's like a camaraderie, right? Even though you don't know these people, but you're all there working together. I definitely noticed that with myself, like a few weeks back, going to a coffee shop and working there. I looked up and I was surrounded by like 3 or 4 other people there who were working on whatever projects they were working on as well. Trying to think of other contexts where, I guess like for me, another one that comes to mind too is like working out. And this may sound strange coming from someone who owns his own training studio, but I enjoy going to different spaces to work out from time to time. My space here in the studio, like if I'm been here training like 6 or 7 clients for the day, and sometimes the last thing I want to do is stay here for another hour and do my workout in here. Fortunately, I have access to like other facilities and places to train, but just to be able to go to a different place where I'm out of like my work element, and I can just put my headphones in and just focus on my exercise, just going somewhere else. That sometimes allows me to have really, really good workouts. Where if I'm in my studio working out where I've been training clients all day, maybe in the middle of my workout, I think of things that I need to do for clients, or I need to clean the gym, or I need to wash that window or clean that here, whatever comes up. Like that's like another context for me, and how changing up environment is fun. Is a great way to just keep me from overthinking and allow me to move into flow more easily. Another context is surfing. Like where I live, 5 minutes away from the beach in San Diego County, I can tend to surf the same spots over and over again. But when fortunately, up and down the Pacific Coast, California, you have a plethora of surf spots. So changing up the normal surf routine and going to a new spot, like there's something very stimulating and a lot of enjoyment around that. Although surfing, I will admit, overthinking is minimal with surfing. Usually surfing is a very zen activity for me. Although changing up the environment of where I'm surfing is a very stimulating process and an enjoyable process. So I'm not sure if that necessarily is in tangent with the overthinking conversation, but it's definitely another way how I use changing up my environment to really enhance my experience and what I'm trying to do at that current moment. So yeah, but I won't go too far off topic about that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, are there any other examples that come up for you, or is there another question that you had in mind?
I just found this serendipitous right before we got on this call to talk about this. I was sitting in my apartment, and I have equipment and stuff that I can train with. And I was sitting there just saying, like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I just going through that loop of like that. To me, that's overthinking, and I'm literally doing nothing. Physically doing nothing when that was the goal, was to go do something physically. So I just walked up to our apartment gym, the complex gym, and they have things obviously I don't have in my apartment that are just bigger and I can use. And that quick change, I was there for a half hour. I got so much done in terms of movement and training quickly by changing my environment.
Yeah.
And knowing that that's available is something I'm going to continue to use more and more and more. Like right after we wrap up here, my plan is to go somewhere else and keep working. Now that I have all these ideas in my head, how can I change my context and apply it? So I think therefore I am. What we've talked about today is very challenging in conceptual ways. However, it's practical in the sense that every person I've ever met has a brain, has an analytical side, whether it's their prominent side or creative side, whether that's their prominent side, whatever it is, we're all prone to stopping ourselves and overthinking when the best thing would be to take action. So, what we touched on is like, all right, how can we get there? We always want to think like, where's our outcome? Let's explore the process. Let's get on that path, see what works, make the next step. Or how you put it, right? We have our ability to view the situation, gather that information, act on what we want, reassess. And then we can go through that process again, or we can continue acting in that way if it's making progress while we're in that process. These are super important pieces that I know a majority of the people that I work with or people that I come across in training settings is what's the best way to do something. And in my opinion, the best thing to do is what you're doing and do it well. And we're only going to improve by doing it. And if we're overthinking, but we're not visualizing, like there's a difference there, like intentionally visualizing doing something well versus overthinking from even starting doing something. That's where we run into trouble. Is if we want to improve, which I imagine if you're listening at this point in the podcast, you're a driven person wanting to improve something, take the first step, right? Take the action, literally forget about the outcome. Yeah. And then you'll realign somehow because you detached and you can take in more information. You can take in the routines, like you setting up your morning. For me, going into my process every single time at the gym by reminding myself of mantras and doing my shoulder stretches and my hip stretches and getting all those things going allows us to take action, which then leads to more action, which then leads to discernment. And then we can meditate on what we've done and we can be more mindful and keep going. Right? Yeah.
It's the other week I was interviewed on the Strong Coach podcast, and the final words of advice and thought that I give, and it was initially spontaneous, but now I see it recurring again. If you're thinking about it, just do it. If you're thinking about it, just do it. And within thinking about it and just doing it, run it through a brief filter. As long as it's in alignment with your values and beliefs and goals, just do it. And let experience be like your your base for knowledge and really give you, how do I say this? Take action so you can gain experience. And when you have those experiences, like no one can take that away from you in life. And that's like some of the best knowledge and wisdom you can get through your own personal experiences. You'll learn more than you would ever learn in any other context in life through your own experiences. You won't experience anything sitting on the couch, watching TV, eating bonbons. So if you're thinking about it, just do it. But yeah, to be honest, like I said, if you're listening at this point in the conversation, you're probably not sitting on the TV eating bonbons. But
yeah, and if you want to, if you are driving, you want to take notes about what you're going to do next, please pull over safely and practice discernment in that way. But yeah, this is a topic that we can go on with forever, but we've touched good pieces, right? How do we get into the process, knowing that the outcome is still going to be there, right? Like we have to take action. We have to assess what we've already done to know where we're going to continue going. The path that we've all been on, the experiences that we've all had, they don't just disappear from behind us, right? They're still there. We can look back and observe what we've done and then understand how we can improve and be our best self going forward.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you hit it on the head, Gunnar.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciated this. Yeah, keep sharing this awesome stuff that we're putting out. Yeah, we're gonna have more to come, more topics eventually. So yeah, if you like what we're talking about, like and subscribe below. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll catch you soon. All right, thank you guys.